Hello YouTube, internet, world. Welcome back to another episode of Dime Store Cinema on the Road. Today, like every other day, let's talk some movies. I think for this little outing, I would like to discuss the classic George A. Romero, Night of the Living Dead. There are a couple reasons why I want to touch on this film. First of all, it is in memory of the late, great George A. Romero. A man who single-handedly redefined an entire genre of movie with this movie, Night of the Living Dead. Completely redefined what it meant to be a zombie. Completely changed the discussion when it came to horror films. And completely changed the notion of legitimacy when it came to horror films. I don't know if there's enough praise that can be said for this man, for his work. It was brilliant and important. And it's a shame to see him go. And I wish only the best for his family. May he rest in peace. My hope and prayer is for peace and grace to all those who knew him personally. Secondly, I think that this film needs to be discussed because of the current social unrest. This movie ended up being, unintentionally speaking, very socially progressive. The main protagonist, and not only the main protagonist, but really the only person in the entire film who remained consistently through the whole film to be the likable focal point of the movie, was a black man. And for a movie to come out in 1968 to feature so positively and prominently a black lead, it was very socially progressive. And based on what I've read, that wasn't Romero's intent. He just knew the guy, they were friends, and he thought that he looked better in front of the camera than anyone else. So, like with so many things, there's this unintentional, deeper meaning. And I know I've spoken on in previous videos about how oftentimes the most important moments in cinema were happy accidents. And I think it's the sign of a great director to roll with and use those happy accidents. It takes a special kind of person to not only see but admit when their ideas aren't the best, and to accept something better. You know, to realize that your careful planning isn't always going to produce the best result. And then allowing a situation that essentially forces itself upon you to essentially take the credit for what you're trying to forcefully control. you look at even people like Kubrick, who were very controlling of the films they were making. Even he would allow for happy accidents to remain in his films, because despite him being brilliant and very meticulously working through everything, I think he was brilliant enough in an actual sense to realize that sometimes things happen that are not in our control. So in this instance, it was just becoming so much more socially relevant than the creator had intended. I mean, this was a low-budget horror film, and really the horror genre, for the most part, was not really seen as a legitimate art form at the time. I mean, it was very far removed from the classic monster stories of, you know, Frankenstein and Dracula and the Wolfman. You know, they were churning out a lot of these low-budget horror films around this time, and there were a bunch of grindhouse films at this time, and so it was all very much considered lowbrow entertainment. And I would say that there can still be that argument made today for it, except that it's so influential. The way that it's shot, the concepts that it creates and presents are so heavily referenced even today that it's hard to look at this movie as mere lowbrow entertainment. And I wasn't alive at the time of its release, so I don't know how it was accepted. I know that my father has said that it was at least somewhat popular enough for him to hear about it and to have interest in it. Of course, part of that was also because it was filmed near where I used to live, about probably an hour or so away from where I lived when I was back on the East Coast. So that might have been part of the interest in it, but I do know that as the years went on, it has remained consistently one of the most influential and important and talked about horror films. And there's a real reason why. I mean, so not only is there that serendipitous social message of having the African American lead portrayed so positively, but you also, at a much more basic level, the idea of Romero's zombies are, in a sense, a social satire in and of themselves, very much pointing out the greed and the voracious appetite of humans and of our society, of a capitalist society, very much pointing out the lengths at which humans will go to just devour those around them, essentially just crawling over one another to reach a lust. And so it was very socially charged anyway, very anti-government, very maybe not anti-government, but very much distrusting government, very much kind of disparaging capitalism. It was that type of movie, just disguised as a horror film, and then there are the added elements onto it, and then of course at the end, spoilers, the main character gets killed, and I won't go into details explaining that and ruin it. Although I will say that if you haven't seen it at this point, you either don't want to see it, or you're not going to see it, because there's no excuse to have gone this long without seeing the movie. I can't imagine why anyone would not have if they were even remotely interested. But I mean, there are people who have long lists of movies that they intend to see and they just haven't yet, or younger watchers, viewers who just haven't gotten around to it yet. Maybe not even aware of it, which I find hard to believe. But like I said, younger viewers might not look at the history of film very much. In which case, I say, watch this movie. It's an important milestone in cinema, and particularly horror cinema. So at the end, when the character is killed, it is a very nice use of irony, and I love irony. Irony is my favorite literary device. I love it because it can be used both comedically and also tragically, and it's a way of conveying a message that I think really, and maybe it's just personally, I think really conveys a message better than even just saying it up front. Because there are levels to it, and there's nuance to it. And a lot of times when someone just tells you something up front, it's not always clear what the motivation is, or what the bias is, or how slanted the facts, or name any type of level that can be conveyed by the human mind and mouth and body, and it can be misconstrued. But when you're dealing with irony, and particularly satire, there's the understanding of sarcasm, and that understanding that you have as a listener informs your interpretation of what you're seeing or hearing or reading. And I think that helps convey a message more clearly than a lot of times just upfront speaking. So as far as this movie goes, I think that it's just as relevant now, and I feel, and I hate saying I feel, I think would be better. I believe, or it is in fact necessary, maybe not necessary, but something that I would really like to do, based on the fact that this movie was so socially progressive, to speak about what happened in Virginia this past weekend. It's absolutely appalling to see humans harm one another in any capacity. It's unspeakable, unfathomable how anyone can justify the level of hatred necessary to not care about their lives. And this, this not speaking of a personal level, not speaking in a personal level of someone who has specifically harmed or wronged you, but just general hatred for people. Just an unspecific hatred. It's inexcusable. And there's no excuse. Well, obviously I said it's inexcusable, so obviously there's no excuse. But it's just I can't. There are no words that can convey just how unhuman it is. You know, we should have evolved beyond this point. We are self-aware and rational. And by all accounts, we progress so much faster when we work together than when we segregate ourselves. It's a point of fact that the building of intellect and of understanding is the inclusion of ideas, is the ability to listen and learn from anyone. So to have any group, and in this case, particularly Nazis and white nationalists and whatever other group was representing any of that, the KKK, for any of them to deny the importance of seeking out ideas in order to become a more well-rounded human being is just an example of how shut off and how ignorant they are. And this is obviously from my point of view. I am a white man. I grew up in a small town with very few minorities. And then moving into a city where there was a lot of diversity, what was difficult to me wasn't so much about being within the context of a multicultural setting. It was that there was so much distrust from one race to another, and it's all perpetuated by years and years and years of being shat upon. I mean, it's ridiculous. And I mean, the motivation, I would say, of many of these racist individuals, I think a lot of it is coming from this rhetoric, this general rhetoric of saying that white people, because we're speaking specifically about white supremacists, there's this constant rhetoric of white people in general having it better and easier and what have you. So that is, in a sense, opening the door for these people who can point to all of the negative things that are happening in their individual lives, not general, because we're not speaking about statistics here, we're speaking about people's lives. And it's really opening up the door for these recruiters to say, well, look, these people are lying to you because your life is terrible. And if your life is terrible and you're missing out on all these things that you want and even you perceive to need, then obviously they're fighting against you. And it leads to this mistrust of minorities because they see them as perpetuating this lie about white people, which is nonsensical and factually wrong in the general sense. And one of the reasons why I do not like speaking in general terms. I think we should deal with problems and situations on an individual level, because no one fits into a mold that is predetermined by someone else. So not all racists are the same. Some people who are perceived as racist are more culturalist or classist than they are racist. And so you have all of these people being lumped into this one thing, and when their personal circumstances don't line up with what the popular voices are saying is characteristic of them, it creates a mistrust, which opens the door for these recruiters, these terrible, despicable people who just want to use the anger of a failed system to breed hatred and just violence towards another generalization of a group of people based on skin or ethnicity or nation or culture. And then, of course, on the other hand, you have actual racism going on. People being treated horribly because of the color of their skin, or because of their social economic status, or name your whatever else is causing it. So it's this horrible situation that we're in that's being perpetuated by terrible rhetoric. Not even necessarily terrible rhetoric. A lot of it on the side of anti-racism is good rhetoric, but the problem is it's very general. So it doesn't meet people in their specific situation. And if we're not meeting them in their specific situation, they feel lied to. So it's just, I don't want to sympathize with these people who are just terrible at being human. But at the same time, I don't want to just lump them all together as one group and try to put a blanket fix on the problem. And I particularly don't want to rely on the government to fix the problem. This is a moral issue. This is a social issue. This is something that communities need to fix. This is not something that the government can legislate away. Because the more you fight them by force, which is essentially the power of government, is force. The more you fight them with force, the more they will gain sympathy. I hate saying that because there's no reason these people should have any sympathy, really, for their actions. I mean, as humans, yes, but for their actions, no. But we've seen it in every group that has ever been persecuted or had horrible things said about them, regardless of how terrible they are. Anytime anyone has forced anyone out of anywhere, there's been a surge of people who sympathize with them, because there's a natural mistrust of government. There's a natural mistrust of people being forced to do things, particularly in America. So I'm having a difficult time knowing what to do or how particularly politicians should react to this, because it's not illegal to have stupid ideas. It's not even illegal to have dangerous stupid ideas. It's illegal to break laws. It's illegal to incite violence. It's illegal to actively participate in violence, unless sanctioned by the government, but that's a whole other thing. So I don't know. I know exactly where I stand as far as their beliefs. They're garbage, and no one should even think that they're better than anyone else, regardless of their education, their money, their skin. It doesn't matter. No one's better than anyone. We're all garbage people. We're all barely making it by. We're all barely intelligent enough to survive every day. We have no control over our lives. We have no control over anything that happens to us. We're just floating along in this world that could at any moment implode and just explode. And you believe in whatever you want, whether it's a God who's sustaining you or just random cosmic chance, whatever you want to believe about it, it doesn't change the fact that you have no control. And if you have no control, then you have absolutely no basis for a belief system that puts you above anyone else. And that includes the racist. I'm not any better than them. My ideas maybe are better, and I'm not hurting anyone, so I think that I'm socially better. But as a human being, I'm not. We're all just trying to get by. We're all trying to make sense of all of this nonsense. So, legally speaking, I mean, let them believe what they want, because they can't possibly win the hearts and minds of the majority of people. Unless we give the common person a reason to sympathize with them. We can't be thought police. We can't keep them from thinking what they're thinking. But what we can do is, on a local level, help one another. Be there for one another. Create communities. It's really hard to hate someone who is actively participating in your local community. If you're a part of something, it's hard to hate that thing that you're a part of. If you feel a sense of belonging, it's really difficult to hate and rebel against that belonging. It's why gangs exist. It's why these racist groups exist. People want to belong to something. They want to feel that they are worth something. They want to feel that they matter. And I think what we're seeing now is a failure of churches, a failure of communities, a failure of just people in general. Everyone is so isolated now. Everyone mistrusts everyone now. Everything is closed off. Everything is behind doors, through computers. Don't get me wrong, I have nothing against computers. They're my favorite thing. But there needs to be personal contact. There needs to be communities. There needs to be a place where people can belong. And we need to create that across denomination, across belief, across party, across gender, across race. We need to all work together. And this is even regardless of our beliefs, because we have to associate with every belief, and then we'll all change. We'll all become better, because we'll all understand one another better. We can't understand someone if we refuse to listen to them. And we can't, on the flip side, we can't spend our time arguing with people who aren't willing to listen. Only tell a person your side of the story if they're willing to listen to it. If they're not willing to listen to it, if they're not willing to grant you the dignity of your humanity, then don't waste your breath. Don't throw a punch. Don't throw anything at them. Ignore them like the spoiled child that they are. But if someone is genuinely interested in you or your beliefs or just a conversation, let them have that. Don't yell at them. Don't throw things at them. Don't treat them like children. Treat them like human beings. So I went off on that tangent. I'm sorry about that. We're talking about Night of the Living Dead. By today's standard, Night of the Living Dead is... it's been replicated so many times that if you go back to watch it now, having never seen it before but have seen more recent movies, it will seem very, very familiar. And it's because everyone takes a note or two from this movie. So if you watch it through the lens of, wow, this is the first time that most of this stuff has been done, it's very, very interesting. It's also very interesting to watch it in the context of the time that it was made in, and realize that it was a major foundational piece of just cinema in general. So from a film history standpoint, it's absolutely incredible. So I don't think it's his best movie, but I think it's his most important. I think it's the one that I like the most because of its social and historical context. And then, of course, there's even the level of gore that's in the movie. It was something that was kind of groundbreaking for this type of movie. I mean, you have a lot of leading up to that and some of the grindhouse cinema that was coming out, and some of the independent stuff, but this one really, although not particularly gratuitous, but when there is gore in it, it was shocking for the time. It was very, very good. And I mean, obviously, you know, this isn't Hollywood proper. This isn't mainstream movie. You know, Bonnie and Clyde is really the movie that kind of opened the door big time for mainstream cinema, ushering in ultra violence. But this movie, I think, kind of laid the groundwork. And like I said, since it was so influential, I think it kind of spoke to a lot of directors, and kind of loosened up some of the minds and sensibilities of people, because it was so prolific. So yeah, I'm sorry I spent so much time talking about Virginia and racial and social tensions, and I do feel strongly about it. I'm not the kind of guy, because I'm not good at it, and I'm very soft-spoken. I'm not the guy who will go out and shout things. However, I do think that when there is a call for it, that is necessary. So I appreciate the people who are willing and able to do that. I will gladly speak with anyone about this topic. I will talk to them, but I'm not the person who will shout and get angry about it. It's not my style, as it were. But yeah, no, I think this movie was ahead of its time. I think that Romero purposefully or inadvertently changed the course of cinema, particularly with this movie. And once again, I'm sad to see him go, and I just would like to thank him posthumously for the influence that he's had in cinema. So, thank you all for watching. Please like, please subscribe if you're into that kind of thing. And I will see you all next time. Bye-bye.